Solar storms by Hansen. Solar storms are eruptions of mass and energy from our sun's surface. Flares, sunspots, and coronal mass ejections, also known as CMEs, are the common events of solar activity. A solar storm can interfere with the Earth's magnetic field, such as disrupting phone lines and all kinds of stuff. When the charged particles from the sun strike atoms and molecules in the Earth's atmosphere, they excite those atoms, causing them to light up, and we know this as the aurora borealis, or the northern lights. Solar flares. A solar flare is an intense burst of radiation coming from the release of magnetic energy associated with sunspots. The main ways we monitor flares is with X-ray and optical light. We mainly see the photons it releases. The frequency of flares correlates with the sun's 11-year cycle. When the solar cycle is at a minimum, active regions are small and rare, and few solar flares are detected, rather than at the higher point of the 11-year cycle, there are more likely to have more solar flares. A solar storm is also known as a geomagnetic storm. A geomagnetic storm is a disturbance of the Earth's magnetosphere caused by solar wind shock. A magnetosphere is a region surrounding a planet where the planet's magnetic field dominates. The ions in the solar plasma are charged, so they interact with these magnetic fields, and solar wind particles are swept around the planetary magnetospheres. Sunspots. The sun's surface is a layer of glowing plasma, and this layer is known as the photosphere, or the sphere of light, and it is about 500 kilometers deep. Within this layer, there are cooler areas also known as sunspots. As you can see in the photo, the sunspots are the lighter, whiter versions in the sun. Sunspots are cooler and darker than the rest of the photosphere, and they are caused by magnetic fields that prevent hot gases from rising to the surface. A reversal of magnetic poles occurs every 11 years, and the number of sunspots reaches its maximum every 11 years, and then starts over. Space weather generally varies within the 11-year sunspot cycle. The more sunspots, the more storms, and the more intense solar wind. The stream charged particles that blow off the face of the sun are what we can see in the aurora borealis or the northern lights. What can go wrong during a solar storm? Humanity began feeling the effects of the solar maximum as soon as technology became sophisticated enough to respond. The last really big storm was in 1859, and there was very little electronic activity. If a similar storm took place today, the effects would be much more dramatic as well as devastating. The internet will certainly go down along with the electric grid. Banking and commerce will grind to an immediate halt, and very few people even think about how dependent we are on technology or electricity. I myself am preparing a PowerPoint at 10:30, going to school with my lights on and the television in the background using my laptop. In a world without electricity, I would be writing on paper in daylight using candle or oil lamp when I didn't have daylight. Solar or geomagnetic storms can disrupt the lights along with smartphones, computers, GPS navigation systems, pretty much everything we rely on in our everyday lives. The electric grid will have to be patched together and possibly completely redone. We may be talking about the literal and physical rebuilding of transmission lines all over the world, and of course communication will be very difficult, such as being in such a connected society. In a world without electricity, streets would be dark, cell phones would undoubtedly not work, and we would only have cars that don't depend on computer chips, which is really rare nowadays. There is very little indication that modern governments are prepared for this kind of catastrophe. We can only hope that there are secret contingency plans to handle an event such as a massive solar storm. We should all be prepared to take care of ourselves if the government and commercial networks fail. And regardless of how we feel about firearms in American society, we should probably consider the possibility that we may need to protect ourselves and our people. This was a quote that I found, and I kind of really liked it. Some effects of solar storms were far beyond the nuisance level, especially at higher latitudes. In August 1972, a 230,000-volt transformer at the British Columbia Hydroelectric Authority blew up when shifting magnetic fields induced a current spike. On March 13, 1989, a storm plunged the Quebec into a complete power blackout, affecting millions. Over the years, such failures, which followed the sunspot cycle have caused hundreds of millions of dollars in damage. So I could only imagine how 2016 would feel if we were to be hit by a massive enough storm. How to be prepared on a solar storm. Knowledge on how to survive off the land is extremely important. Becoming more self-sufficient by not being as dependent on the things around you. Stock up on things such as beans and canned food or anything that doesn't need to be refrigerated. Have seeds on hand so you can plant them in the future, and learn about the plants that you are planting so you can understand the benefits. Learn about edible and wild plants and how to prepare them. Keep bulks of bottled water and learn how to dig a well/filter water. And by that, I think you should just keep on hand lots of filters. Learn how to butcher animals and prepare your own meals from scratch. Nowadays, we all depend on food in the stores and food in our refrigerator. We don't really understand how important it is to make food from everything. Be less dependent on technology. This is the biggest thing, because if we are to have a solar storm, technology would be zero, and that would be really hard. So if you limit yourself now, you would be more likely to feel successful in a solar storm. Doing this PowerPoint, I have realized how little we are prepared for a solar storm, and that's quite scary. I would only hope that in a situation such as a solar storm, we could come together and not fight and steal food from others. So solar storms are just important to keep in mind and learn from as we expand into a higher technology world.